I'm Amanda Kenton from Safe Tech International, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you all to our webinar. As a team, Safe Tech International has been working for some years to raise awareness about many of the issues we'll hear more about today, as well as other issues pertaining to the tsunami of tech in our world. Sometimes it has felt a bit like shouting into the abyss. However, in the last year or so, parents, teachers, and even some celebrities and members of the UK royal family have started to speak out about their concerns about the effects of screen time on children's well-being. That's been most gratifying. In fact, it was the work of independent filmmaker and musician Tim Arnold that initially inspired me to set up this webinar, which, thanks to the hard work of my amazing colleagues in reaching out to people, it has evolved to become greater than the sum of its parts. In the process, we discovered that thankfully there are many groups around the world working to protect children's interests, and those of us all, which is very exciting. Only a fraction of them could be represented today. If they all came on, we'd have a marathon webinar, but we do have a very full program. We're most grateful to our speakers for giving of their time to be here with us today. So now I'll hand over to my colleague Kate Keel for a few introductory remarks before the fabulous buffet of presentations that awaits us.
Thank you so much. The issue before us, our children's engagement with technology, couldn't be more consequential. We're at a cosmic juncture in a world in flux. Tech and AI accelerate, exponentialize, and magnify whatever they touch and wherever applied. So the choices we make now will make all the difference in the world, to quote the poet Robert Frost. We all want to give our children the nurturing, the skills, and love they'll need to grow into wise, compassionate, and contributing members of society. But is the way technology is now being implemented going to help or to hinder our attaining these goals? If you're here today, likely you too are grappling with this question. The good news is that although we may not hear much about it in the mainstream news, a course correction is already here. Today's presenters will offer insights about how we might pivot in this tech-turbocharged world to a more heart-centered, respectful of human dignity, wisdom-infused guardianship of our children, our health, and of the earth. In the coming days, as more thoughts and experiences enter our field of awareness, bit by bit, with a prayer in our hearts, we can find a way through this civilizational quagmire. Openness, curiosity, and communication can serve as the mycelium network through which we grow our understanding of this issue, as well as all issues. It is in this vein that we welcome and thank you for joining us for today's presentations. As a prelude, I would like to share a few poignant words written by Jenny, age 16, before she took her life. Jenny's mother, Deborah, will be one of our speakers today. Jenny wrote, "I have no hope for humanity. We are destroying this beautiful earth as we speak. I'm not good enough with words to stand out from the crowd and somehow help humanity. I'm insignificant, an insignificant number on someone's screen, and so is my whole life a tiny blip in the whole existence of the universe. And I find it hard to be hopeful when I can barely enjoy anything anymore." This webinar is but one of many efforts people are taking to let our children know they do count, they are significant, and to keep the hope. Opening our first group of speakers will be Emily Churkin from the US. Emily is a well-known author, speaker, consultant, and associate professor of public policy. She's also co-chair of Fair Play Screens in Schools Action Network and the lead plaintiff in a class action lawsuit against one of the largest ed tech companies in the world. Next, we'll hear from Jess Kingsford from Australia, where it's about 4 a.m. now. Jess will be discussing the impact of tech on kids' moral development. She has worked as a research psychologist, lecturer, and tutor for the Sydney University, Charles Sturt University, and the University of Texas before founding Happy Heart Parenting. Our third speaker will be Lluna Porta from Catalan, Spain. Lluna believes our hyper-connected world and its challenges can only be tackled if families, educators, and institutions work together. She's on the board of Adolescencia Libre de Móviles, which is adolescents free from mobile phones, and is a longtime campaigner for the protection of children's rights, both online and offline, in the group Piña por la Educación. She is also a concerned mother to teenagers who are navigating the digital age. Diego Hidalgo de Meusols from Spain will be our fourth speaker. Diego's an author, entrepreneur, and fierce campaigner about the social, cultural, and political effects of our relationship with digital technology. And now, Emily, take it away.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Kate, and everyone else. Today, I'm going to try something a little bit different. I've put together a presentation in 3 parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. In spite of the fact that children average 7.5 hours a day on screens outside of school hours, in spite of the fact that the youth mental health crisis rages on, in spite of the fact that we have a loneliness epidemic among young men and boys, in spite of the fact that social media companies steal our children's innocence while educational technology companies steal and sell their data, and in spite of the fact that manipulative products in the form of chatbots and tutors infiltrate our children's bedrooms and classrooms, in spite of all these things, I have hope. I believe we are on a trajectory of change. Things feel different to me today than they did a year ago. This is not the first time in the history of the world, nor will it be the last, that a small but mighty group of voices rise up together to say, not on our watch, not to our children, not to anyone's children. I am not being hyperbolic when I say that failing to address the havoc wreaked by the technology industry on childhood and education is a direct threat to democracy around the world. The choices we make today will define our future. So there is urgency in our work and in our messages. We don't have time to wait and see. We are the flutter of the butterfly wings that will sweep like a hurricane around the world. In my brief talk today, I'm going to offer you ideas in sets of 3, because 3 is a powerful number, a symbol of completeness and balance, but also the smallest amount of items that can make a pattern, like a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning. I spent over a decade as a middle school English teacher. During that time, I witnessed the rise of smartphones and social media use among my students and the simultaneous shift to digital tools in my role as a teacher. My students would come into class on Monday fraught with anxiety about the social events that were posted on Facebook that they'd not been invited to, in tears because it's easier to be cruel in the comments, distracted by the dramas that continued in the hall. Over a decade later, children hold the devices of divisiveness and distraction in their hands, never free from the spin and churn of their online lives in the offline world. So I talked with my students. I asked them why the screen provided a protective barrier to cruelty. I implored them to be kind online, just like we would expect them to behave in school. But they taught me a lesson. Emily, they said, it's not just us. It's our parents. They're texting and driving. They're playing Candy Crush. They're scrolling through Facebook. It's not just us. An aha moment. This is not a kid problem. This is an adult problem that is impacting children. And as adults, it is our responsibility to fix it. But I am not anti-tech. How can I define what I meant more clearly? I came up with the phrase tech intentional, whose definition is very specific. To me, these are the 3 pillars of tech intentionality. Number 1, less is more. Number 2, later is better. And number 3, relationships and skills before screens. That's all. That's the foundation on which we build our house of rules around technology or screen use, on which we rest our family's values, on which we rely when the stress and conflicts mount. Being tech intentional is the beginning. The middle. A few years later, but still over 10 years ago, I was working with a student who was about 12 years old. She showed me that all her schoolwork, textbooks, handouts, written assignments, lessons were entirely digital, housed in the iPad given to her by the district. To do her science homework, she navigated and toggled between apps and websites, scrolling and searching, frustrated and bored. Finally, she gave up, copy-pasted the question into Google, copy-pasted the answer into her digital app. She didn't really know about plagiarism, she told me when I asked. Why not just retype the answers in her own words, I wondered. I don't know how to type, she said. 10 years later, kindergartners file onto the playground before school starts to play on their school-issued iPads. The slides and climbing structures are hard and cold and scary, plus kids have to figure out turn-taking and bumping into each other. That's too much work. The iPad is easy, fun, and doesn't cause conflicts. Each child has her own. Today, older students in schools use ChatGPT to write their history essays and research papers because we gave them a homework machine and told them, expected them, they with an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, not allowed or able to drive a car or vote, to use it responsibly, and then we acted surprised when they didn't. Today, parents cave to peer pressure, blindly accept new and extremely problematic cultural norms that dictate it's okay to soothe infants with iPhones or toddlers with tablets, that it's a rite of passage to give a child their first phone at 12 or 10 or 8. Each year, the passage rite gets younger. That depriving a tween of social media means her social life is ruined. And yes, while it is hard, and yes, most children do have devices now, no, it does not have to be this way. No, it does not exempt us from the hard work of teaching our children resilience and grit, because these are the skills they will need to thrive, even just function as adults in our society. But we as parents have been told to allow all feelings without also teaching our children that they can handle the really unpleasant ones without needing rescue by a parent or distraction by a device. We have forgotten to say the second part to our children. We know this is tough. We know you are hurting, and we know you're capable of doing hard things. So it is our job now to ask 3 new questions when we offer the tablet, when we consider the phone, when we give in to the games. What do we gain? What do we lose or replace? What do we model? The choices we make as parents and adults, of course, matter too. Sure, we buy time or quiet or the ability to get something done uninterrupted, and we may make those choices sometimes. But parents are always teaching, even if we don't want to be. That is the blessing and curse of being a parent. What we gain and what we lose when we choose our screens in moments of boredom or frustration, we are also teaching, modeling, showing, in line at the grocery store, waiting for the doctor's appointments, idling at the red light. In our reach and our scroll, we teach. Part 3, the end. Phone-free schools and smartphone-free childhoods are finally mainstream topics of conversation in the current focus of numerous advocacy efforts around the globe, though small choruses have been singing this song for many years now. These are good changes, of course. We waited to see what would happen if we let social media companies run rampant across childhood and adolescence, and now we know, and it's bad, and we shouldn't have waited. So we fight to claw our children, addled and addicted, back from the brink against a Goliath whose weapons are strong and marketing budget is vast. It's not a fair fight. The dopamine snacks of short-form videos are infinitely more satisfying than a boring book, a slower-paced friend, any experience that is hard or challenging or difficult. Hijacked neural pathways are no match for reality. And at the same time, we're telling children, these devices are unsafe. These social media platforms are unhealthy. This screen time, it's too much. At the same time, we make policies and rules to keep smartphones at bay during the school day. We hand children internet-connected iPads and Chromebooks in the name of learning and tell them, don't get off task. Only use this for educational purposes. You are responsible for what happens on this device. This end is actually a new beginning. An opportunity to resist the notion that technologists know more about children and learning than teachers do. There's an opportunity to ask 3 new questions, to raise caution about the use of educational technology products in the classroom, to highlight the bare and alarming fact that the business model of big tech is the same as the business model of ed tech, and that this business model is fundamentally at odds with child development. We are called then to ask, when we say no to the phones at schools, but yes to the Chromebooks in the class, number 1, is it effective? No. Number 2, is it safe? No. Number 3, is it legal? No. To all 3 questions, a resounding, capitalized no. No, they are not effective. Teachers and paper books and handwritten work are effective learning tools. No, they are not safe. Children are watching porn and YouTube and being groomed on their school devices in the name of the future of education. This is what kids need now. They must learn or be left behind. A fallacy, a lie, and a profitable strategy that benefits companies, not children. And no, the data these companies collect about our children and sell to third parties for profit is no way legal and was in no way obtained with informed or meaningful parental consent. The end is another beginning, and the beginning of the future of education is tech intentional, where schools only use screen-based technologies that enhance, nurture, and support teachers, students, and communities in a way that align with values, mission, pedagogy, and child development. Less is more, later is better, relationships and skills first. Tech intentional schools use technology only when that technology is uniquely necessary, educationally sound, and private by default. There are many paths for this. A starting point is bringing back hardwired computer labs, Ethernet, and technology education teachers to provide technology education, not educational technology, because ed tech is not tech ed. I have heard many times that this fight feels like David versus Goliath. It's true. We aren't as well funded or platformed as the mighty technology behemoths we battle. But that doesn't mean we give up or walk away or let them win. We have a choice. None of this is a foregone conclusion. And remember, in the story of David and Goliath, it's the conclusion of the story that's actually the part of this analogy that matters. David won. Thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name's Jess. I'm just going to share my screen. Good afternoon, everybody. And I have to say that even though it is 4 in the morning here in Australia, I am thrilled to be part of this event. So thank you for inviting me, Kate. And I'm very excited, let me just minimize that as well. Very excited to be talking to you all today about the impact of digital technology on children's moral development and consequently on their mental and emotional well-being. In this very short presentation, I'm just going to answer these 4 questions. What is moral development? How is it linked to mental and emotional well-being? And how are those processes and that relationship, how is digital technology interfering with those processes and that relationship? And what can we do about it? But first, if you'll allow me, I just want to tell you a little bit about us. We are Happy Hearts Parenting, based here in Australia. We're a not-for-profit organisation. Our main offering is an online parenting program, but we produce various other things, newsletter, free downloads, etc. We've recently expanded our work into educational and community settings with our culture of mutual care framework and practices. And our mission behind all of those things is to empower parents and educators with really practical tools and strategies to help kids be more connected and tuned in to the needs and interests of others. And I will say that even though my former life was in academia, I have a PhD in childhood moral development. I discovered that there is this powerful link between moral development and childhood mental and emotional well-being. And I just wanted to share that with as many people as I could. So I left academia, and I really just want to help parents and educators promote this powerful link in children as early as possible. So let's answer this first question now, because it is quite important that we're all on the same page. What is moral development? And by extension, what is a moral person? For the longest time, we have just thought that it was really about children learning to tell right from wrong. That was really just about their ability to engage in moral reasoning and solve moral dilemmas. But happily, in recent decades, we've come a long way. And moral development, we realize now that moral development is really about the process of becoming a certain kind of person. And we recognize that person when we see them out in the world, because it's essentially someone who cares about and contributes to the well-being of others. So you can tell just from that phrasing that it's really more about identity than it is about somebody's ability to engage in and solve moral dilemmas. Okay, so let's look at this second question. Now, how is it linked to mental and emotional well-being? How is the process of becoming that kind of person linked to well-being? And the very short answer to that is, well, we know that because there is just a ton of evidence supporting this claim. And I obviously don't have time in this presentation to drill into any of this research, but this research is available to the general public. There's some great books out there that have translated this research into popular science literature, so you can go and check it out for yourselves if you wish. So we can move on now to the next question, which is, how is digital technology interfering with those moral development processes and their links to well-being? And to understand the answer to that question, we really need to appreciate that the process of moral development essentially involves the development, preferably in childhood, of what's called other-focused skills, behaviors, and attributes. And that term may be unfamiliar to you, but it just refers to skills, behaviors, and attributes that involve sometimes, if not often, putting the needs, thoughts, and feelings of others before one's own. And in our parenting program, we use this model here to teach parents how they can nurture and promote the development of those other focused skills, behaviors, and attributes. And I'm sure that you can all appreciate, even just intuitively, that the development of these things requires a whole bunch of things, such as, for example, the things that I've listed here. It requires an awareness of others, a sensitivity to the experiences of others, to the experiences of others, an attunement to the emotions of others, the ability to experience empathy and compassion towards others, the motivation to actually do things for others. So it obviously requires that there are no competing dopamine deliveries nearby. And it requires parents and carers who are aware and available, tuned in to their kids and to their surroundings. And I'm sure I don't need to spend any time telling this audience here that, or convincing you that the current environment that kids are growing up in is not conducive to satisfying these requirements. We're living during times when kids, and indeed the adults in our societies, are increasingly disconnected from one another and increasingly self-focused. And in case it isn't obvious, that is basically the opposite of what we need for kids to enjoy a normal moral development journey and, in turn, good mental and emotional health outcomes. And look, the next few slides I have here are really just the mental health picture in my own country and indeed in other highly individualistic nations. And all these reports are pointing to the same worrying declines in youth mental health. And I know that I'm not alone in suggesting that it's not a coincidence that there appears to be this inverse relationship between kids being increasingly plugged in to digital technology, their devices, disconnected from others, increasingly self-focused, and their moral development compromised as a result. And there's this inverse relationship between that and what's been described as plummeting youth mental health. So let's move on to our last question now. What can we do about all of this? Well, at Happy Hearts Parenting, we think there's actually quite a lot that we can do to help kids develop a healthier balance between these two projects. That largely involves helping kids develop a stronger sense of their interdependence with others. And a strong sense of interdependence, by the way, involves feeling and knowing that we all fundamentally need each other. We depend on each other throughout our lives in so very many ways. And look, we know how important this is for well-being, because the Harvard study, the longest running study on human development, found that a strong sense of our interdependence with others is actually one of the best predictors of long-term mental and emotional well-being. So at Happy Hearts Parenting, that's exactly what we're working hard to promote across a whole range of settings and in a variety of ways, such as the ones I've briefly described and I'm listing here, helping parents and educators to help their kids develop other focused skills, behaviors, and attributes, such as these here: awareness, empathy, compassion, gratitude, helping, and giving, in the service of developing a stronger sense of their interdependence with others, a healthier balance between their sense of me and we, in short, a healthy moral development journey. And the idea here is that focusing on and nurturing and promoting a healthier moral development pathway for kids will serve as a kind of counterweight to what is happening on the other side of these scales, which we're all so painfully aware of. And finally, we are passionate about what we do because, in the words of American psychologist Marshall Rosenberg, our survival as a species depends on our ability to recognize that our individual well-being and the well-being of others are in fact one and the same. Thank you very much. I'd love to hear your comments or questions on this presentation.
Thank you for having me. I think it's my turn to speak. Thank you, Kate, and Safe Tech International. I'm going to talk about pornography and children today, and what to do about it. So to make my point, I like to take you back 13 years. This was 2012. I'm the mother of 2 little boys, no doubt in the picture, and my concern on how to approach the topic of sexuality arises. I was increasingly worried about the hypersexualization of girls and women in the media and video games, so there was no access to any of that at home. In the meantime, I had been a teacher for many years, and I was a little bit concerned of what I was observing. I had been observing how children would become non-existing in front of their new devices, and I was worried about the effect the internet and screens had on them. So I began to study what happens in the brain when you watch internet porn, and I discovered Gary Wilson's work. I started with porn because I saw that 2 of the major problems for young minds were pornography and addiction. So I started with porn. I don't know if you have heard of Gary Wilson. His work, his brilliant book, Your Brain on Porn, is amazing. But if you don't have time to read that, there's an amazing and very short TED Talk, The Great Porn Experiment. And the experiment, you can guess it, it has been done in our kids. My concern was that my 2 boys and my students could be affected by it. One day I caught one of my 12-year-old students watching hard porn on his phone. And I was struck by that. The video was very violent. It looked like a gang rape. And he was a very kind boy from a very nice family. So that was a wake-up call for me. And I realized that probably all the data that I had from Gary Wilson from the US was also true in Spain. So what I did, I don't have much time to develop the whole topic, but what I thought that I could create a little countdown from 10 to 0 with some highlights, so you'd have an idea of this topic. 10 years old is the age most American boys who look up for porn are. This data is from 2012, which means the boys that are searching for porn now are not only 10 but younger. So that's the starting point of my research. Then 9 out of 10, so 90% of Spanish university students believe that online pornography portrays exactly how having sex is in real life. The problem is that the pornography, we might remember, maybe we watched pornography when you were younger at some point. And the problem is that today, 80% of the pornography is violent or humiliating towards women. And this is not only in Spain, as you can think, as you can imagine, pornography is a worldwide concept. So any child from any country watches pornography from any country. So it's just a fact that it's a global, international fact. The pornography our kids watch is quite different from the one we used to watch. So what it used to be hard porn, it's now mainstream. 8 is the age Spanish kids access online porn accidentally. And this is important because this is the average, which means some kids accidentally watch it later and some of them watch it earlier than that. So they are not looking for pornography, but pornography is actively looking for them. I don't know if you're aware that the business of pornography has changed. And now the business is exactly like social media. The more minutes you spend watching porn, the more millions they earn. And they wanted to increase the target client, and they decided to increase it with the minors. So the problem is, I'm going to give you an example. Imagine that your child is little and he likes Peppa Pig. Then there's going to be a link with a very interesting image saying, look what Peppa Pig is doing. You click there, and then you're going to watch porn. The algorithm knows the age of your kids and feeds them with what they like. So if your son or daughter doesn't like Peppa Pig, it's going to show them something else: FIFA, football, Paw Patrol, etc. 7 years had Javier been watching porn when he admitted at 19, undressed one of my sisters with artificial intelligence to get aroused. I never thought that porn could make me cross that line. 6 are the solutions to protect minors Michel de Mouget proposed. Michel de Mouget is a French neuroscience expert, and he's top of the world. And he is writer of the book Screen Damage: The Dangers of Digital Media for Children. And these 6 measures are: 1, never watch screens before going to school. 2, 0 screens for children from 0 to 6 years old. 1 year ago, the Spanish Association of Pediatricians have also updated their digital plan and their recommendations from families. And they also recommend 0 screens from 0 to 6 years old. Number 3, never watch inappropriate content. 4, never use 2 devices at once. It destroys your attention ability, among other things in your brain. 5, never use the internet devices in the bedroom. 6, never watch anything online 2 hours before bed. I added a 7th one: never while you're sharing meals with your family or feeding your child. Number 5, so we continue with the countdown. 5 is the age Pau was when he thought it would be a good idea to practice a fellatio to her 2-year-old sister. But why would he think that? Because his classmate told him he would love it. Number 4 is the age Alberto's son was when he tried to practice a fellatio to him. 4 years, when he was coming out of the shower, because at his cousins there was no screen limits. Monkey sees, monkey does. This is the age of symbolic play. Children copy adults, and also if they spend too much time on screens, they copy what they see on the screens. Number 3 are the numbers of proposals from smartphone-free adolescents I want to highlight today for all families. So this group I am a member of, it's called Adolescencia Libre de Móviles, which loosely translates as smartphone-free adolescents. In 2023, we created a survey and we received 30,000 answers from families. We learned that the majority of families gave the smartphone before they wanted, and they did it reluctantly, in fear that their children will be getting isolated. So they wanted to delay it, but they didn't know how to. Also, they thought that in this way, they could communicate with the children could communicate with them, and they didn't know the alternative. So we learned all that. So then we propose the 4 things that are in our objectives, which is inform families so they can decide to delay the smartphone until they are 16. If they have enough information, we think they would choose to do that. And then also regulate the social media until 16. And then schools with no phones. And finally, more alternatives in the real world to play offline for children. Number two, finally, I invite you to check our Parents Pact. When we do things as a community, it's way easier. If you don't live in Spain, you can start a pact in your children's class, in your school, city, or country too. Finally, I encourage you to learn as much as possible so you can guide your children in the digital world. Because now it's part of their lives, and even if you don't give them their phone, they're going to use it in class or in another's friend's house. So in the website adolescencialibre.es, we have a lot of resources. Finally, number two, all crimes perpetrated in Spain by minors have recently gone down in the last 2 years, which is very good, but there are two exceptions. Maybe at this point you can guess which ones are going to be. They are ascendant violence from children to parents or to grandparents, and sexual violence. Finally, number one is my advice. It's in your hands, whether you are a dad, a mom, an educator, or a politician, to make little changes in your daily life. They go a long way. And zero is the minutes my 19-year-old son uses his smartphone. Why? Because he chose not to have one. He stopped using it 6 months ago, and he's very happy about it. Change is possible. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for the previous speakers. It's harder to talk now that all these great speakers have talked before me. So I'm Diego Hidalgo, based in Spain. I'm the founder of the Off movement, and I'll give you a little background about us before anything. So we, the Off movement, were born out of the Off Manifesto, which has been signed so far by over 400 personalities from a very broad range of disciplines: philosophers, scientists, artists, journalists, educators, and also business people. And the Off Manifesto is an alert on the critical point we're reaching with respect to our relationship with technology, especially a type of technology that is designed to exploit human vulnerabilities. As some of you have mentioned too, we're not against technology, and off doesn't refer to turning everything off. It's actually an appeal, a call to reinvent the off button. I don't know if you remember this little button that used to be present in all our devices, and which actually help us engage, I think, in what Emily Cherkin calls an intentional attitude towards technology. So the off button has largely vanished from our lives and devices, and we call to reinvent it in both maybe a physical, but of course a metaphorical way as well. So our goal is to mobilize humanity at a large scale against what we call tech alienation. And our initiatives aim to zoom in on specific fields in which we consider that tech is particularly misaligned with human interests, and where we can identify leverages to generate concrete change. And as you probably all know, and as it's pretty clear, maybe clearer now after these talks we've already heard, one field in which technology is particularly misaligned with human interests is education and childhood or teenage. So Spain has been our lab so far, but we're now going global. And as you are probably, I suppose a lot of you here are very much aware of the nature of the problems we're facing. So I'm going to focus a little more on the type of action we carry out at OFF. The first action, so we launched the Off Manifesto a year and a half ago, more or less. And the first concrete initiative we launched is called the Off EdTech initiative. It's based on a white paper that we drafted thanks to a group of psychologists, educators, parents, and teachers. Yuna was actually in that group. And we had also the decisive help of Catherine Lécuyer. For those of you who know her, she's the writer, best-selling writer of The Wonder Approach and of one of the first book that was critical of edtechs, I think 12 years ago. I think in English the title is It's Better in 3D. So the Off EdTech white paper, so to speak, explains very synthetically why we should drastically limit the presence of digital technology in schools, and why school education should be part of the solution and not the problem of hyperconnection that the previous speakers have explained, and that's very much affecting minors, children, and teenagers. So there's a lot of health, psychological, educational, and ethical reasons why we should, I believe, and limit drastically this presence of technology in schools. And if you go through it, I won't go into a lot of details because some of you have already actually done so, and I don't have that much time. But there's a list of 12 reasons that we list. Some of you might be aware of a lot of them, but we wanted to reach a very broad public. And some of the key points, of course, are the fact that EdTech often imply a source of distraction and a gateway towards recreational and leisure purposes or uses of technology, such as pornography, gaming, social media, watching videos, etc. We also know that the presence of tech in schools, in classrooms, and to do your homework impacts negatively concentration and listening skills. We also know that reading on paper and writing by hand are actually superior to writing on a screen, especially when it's a touch screen. There's a great relationship between the hand and the brain, especially on memory and other cognitive skills. Technology used in schools also contributes to generating a passive attitude in pupils. It contributes to making children less responsible. A very concrete example would be the fact that if you don't write yourself your own homework and rely on a platform in which the teacher already has indicated all the homework that has to be done, it doesn't help making kids responsible for the own things they should do. And also we point out to the fact that actually, having kids use technology from a very young age doesn't, I think Emily already mentioned that, but actually isn't preparing them for a highly digitized world. It's not giving them more opportunities to take advantage of this highly digitized work. There's a lot of evidence that shows, for instance, that kids that have been using technology constantly at an early age are actually, for example, more subject to misinformation, that they actually know how to use computers not as well as those who actually started using them later. Of course, there's a lot of also of privacy and data issues related to EdTech that Emily Churkin already mentioned. And if I had to maybe just mention one last problem, I think it's the ethical issue behind EdTech. In a world in which machines are, of course, capable from a technical point of view of doing more and more things for us, does that mean that we're going to basically, us humans, accept secondary roles, and step outside of the sort of human-to-human relationship equation? Well, we think not, and also we think that schools should remain a sort of sanctuary of human-to-human relationships. And we also offer in that EdTech initiative 5 solutions, but I'll let you go through them for those you're interested in our website. It's in Spanish, French, and English. And what I want to say about that to finish is that we tried through all these initiatives to reach a very broad public, to actually reach the mainstream media. And we're quite happy about the fact that we actually got a huge media coverage with the initiative. And just to conclude this point on EdTech, one of our little successes, of course, also thanks to the work of other organizations, is the fact that the Madrid region in Spain, in which with whom we've engaged in a strong relationship, have actually decided to de-digitize, to basically get rid of EdTech, at least in primary schools. The third point I wanted to mention is also the fact that I think it's very important that our activism doesn't remain in screens. That's why we, through our initiatives, try to put people, to take them to the street. We organize demonstrations in June in favor of the right to disconnect. And the subtitle was, "Let's Protect Children's Health." So again, these actions are aimed to draw media attention, and we had all the national media presence in those 12 demonstrations that we organized the same day in Spain, also thanks to the support of about 20 organizations such as Adolescencia Libre de Móviles, but also the Spanish Pediatric Society, environmental NGOs, and others. And I'll finish with the one last initiative that we haven't made public yet. So this is one of the first time I speak publicly about it, and I'm very happy to do so in this context. And our next initiative is called Off February. I imagine lots of you have heard of Dry January, where we're basically launching, and the first edition will be next February, a digital version of the Dry January, calling for a sort of digital sobriety. It's based on a very simple action, which consists in erasing your social media apps for a month, and any app that you might consider subjectively that steals more time away from you than the value it's adding you. And basically the idea is any alternative to the time you spend on social media is actually more favorable to your well-being, whether it's sleeping, reading, playing sports, being with other people, walking, cooking, or pretty much anything you can think about. So you might think that that's not totally related to childhood, because we're not targeting minors, as we actually consider it off that minors, that social media should be banned for minors under 18, but we do think that it's actually very much connected to it for reasons that have actually some of the previous speakers have mentioned. Emily said that we're facing an adult problem that affects kids, and we think that it's not just a kids problem. And I'll just finish saying that we're looking for partners in all the countries. We're targeting specifically Spain, France, the UK, and the US for this first edition. But any of you that might be interested to partner, please feel free to reach out. We have great ambassadors in different countries that are already supporting the initiative. So looking forward to working with many of you on this initiative if you'd like to join as partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emily, Jess, Luna, and Diego. That's incredibly thought-provoking presentations. I'm sure we'll all be researching the various things you've touched on and taking action accordingly. Up until now, we've been talking primarily about what one might call the more obvious effects of smartphones on kids. But there's another aspect which is often overlooked and may not be familiar to some of you. So our next speakers are going to address this. I should add, if it all starts to feel a bit too concerning, we ask that you listen with an open mind. Please don't despair and stay with us, because our focus will be on solutions later on. Firstly, we have Theodora Scarrato, Director of Environmental Health Sciences. I lost track of the number of her qualifications, her incredible experience, but I'll just say she's a special expert to the International Commission for Biological Impacts of Electromagnetic Fields. She's published several peer-reviewed papers, was a lead technical expert and petitioner in a successful lawsuit against the FCC in the USA, and formerly served as Executive Director of the Environmental Health Trust. Next, we'll hear from Deborah Fry, a member of the core team at ACE, which stands for Adult, Child, Health and Environmental Support. Deborah will share her daughter Jenny's very moving personal story and offer ways we can give our children a more hopeful and meaningful future by providing safer and more wholesome uses of technology. And then author Shannon Rowan will discuss the addictive aspects of technology and share about and explain the background for her latest book, which is very intriguing, The Red Shoes, Our Devil's Dance with Technology and How We Can Stop It. And we'll conclude this group of speakers with an inspiring video presentation from Bronwyn Desjardins, who was unable to be with us in person today. Bronwyn is from Mauritius and is head of EdTech for Smartphone Free Childhood South Africa. With over 2 decades of working in EdTech, she empowers schools and families to reclaim childhood from digital distraction. championing schools as nurturing spaces for play, creativity, and authentic connection. So, Theodora, if you'd like to take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be speaking with all of you today. I envision a world where technology is safe for people and the environment. And I've been working on this issue of wireless radiation since 2012, when I realized that everything I could do as a parent could not fix the larger technology issues. And I have infinite hope. When I first learned this issue, I was, I have to say, quite upset about it. But I am just know that things are changing. People are becoming aware of this issue of wireless. So I'm thankful to be talking to you today. Now, once upon a time, when I worked as a clinical social worker, and I've worked in schools and ADHD clinics, children, families, also adults, I, like the speakers who spoke before, began to see changes in my clients. Now, back then in the 90s, we never envisioned that children would be using cell phones. I mean, it was really unheard of. You know, I got it when I was 30 years old, my first phone, for safety. So I thought. And what I began to see in the clients I worked with, especially the kids, was an overuse. My young male clients became addicted to video games with behaviors that were comparable to my clients with, of course, drug addiction. And I began to see bullying and naked videos being shown, suicide, suicidal thoughts, and mental health issues. But what I didn't know was that in addition to the addiction, the sleep impacts, anxiety, depression, emotional problems, social isolation, and the addictive algorithms, which are exploiting our children's attention, hijacking their reward pathways, and taking them into places that I never thought possible. There's the issue of wireless radiation. I thought when I first heard that it even existed, because I thought that my cell phone was magic. I thought that it just worked. I never really thought about how it worked. And I started to look into this issue. I assumed it was safe. What I've learned is that there is no pre-market safety testing for long-term exposure, and that the limits we have, not just in the United States, but in most, not all countries in the world, they're based on the assumption that heating is the only harm. That if our body temperature heats up, that's how there can be harmful effects in the short term. And we don't even have limits that are set to protect against long-term effects from the kind of exposure we're experiencing. And I was asked to share with you what this radiation, and I have a meter and I set it up on this. This is a radiation meter, and I'm in my home where I have a very low level. I have another kind of meter here too. And I'm going to turn on the cell phone to show you what happens when we turn on the phone. Can't hold everything at one time. So and now I'm going to turn it off. Now I also have some earbuds. Let me show you those. And I had to put it in a pot because when I charged it, it started making so many problems that. Okay, and my phone's off. So here are the earbuds that we're putting in our ears, that kids are putting in our ears. Let me turn off the sound and put it back in the pocket. Yes, metal does block this radiation. And actually, just a note on that. So one of the problems with the way that our limits are set is that they don't consider environmental issues. They don't consider that you might have necklaces, metal behind you in the workplace. And that can really actually increase your exposure because the radiation can bounce off of metal. That's why we don't want to be using wireless devices in cars, because there can be unexpected ways and intensities that happen in cars. Okay, so I want to share a couple other things. I was really skeptical at first when I learned about this issue. I couldn't believe that there could be a problem or that the government had made such a bad mistake. And I ended up several years ago, just a few years ago actually, suing the federal government with Environmental Health Trust and several other petitioners because our government, like many, has not looked at the issue and shown that they've given it a hard look. So what ended up happening was the FCC, which at that time was headed by a former industry lawyer, and that seems to be the case repeatedly in the United States and in many other countries, they decided that our limits, which we set in 1996, but are actually based on limits from the 80s, did not need to be changed. And that gave us an opportunity to file a lawsuit about the level of review. The federal government was ordered to address the issues of specifically children's vulnerability, long-term health effects, how technology has changed, and do the limits we have really protect us that were set in 1996, going actually based on 1980s and earlier studies. And the FCC was ordered to address this issue. They were ordered to respond as to how our regulations protect children, protect for long-term exposure, protect the environment, birds, bees, and trees, of which there is extensive research showing harm. And they have not responded. It's been since 2021. When you start to delve into this issue, and I'm going to share my screen now, so what I found shocking was just the amount of studies that exist. So what this is showing is imaging that engineers do, and there are a lot of studies that have looked into this issue, showing how does the radiation penetrate into our body, into our brain and body. And this is a study that actually looked at virtual reality as well as a phone to the head, comparing an adult to a child. Children absorb this radiation at higher intensities and deeper into their brain compared to adults. They have thinner skulls, they have smaller heads, they actually have different, more water in their tissues, so there's more conductivity, you could say, to the radiation. It goes deeper. The colors you're seeing, the lighter colors are the more intense levels, rates of exposure, rates of absorption into tissue, and it goes from yellow to orange to red to purple to blue. And as you can see, there's more intensity deeper into the child brain. That goes for laptops as well and tablets. This is a tablet and a 6-year-old child that was simulated, showing this is kind of showing how the radiation comes out and the intensities into the eye and brain. And you can go online to learn more about this. I have a short time to present, so I'm just going to briefly run over a few things. This is an example where they were looking at a laptop closer to the body and at what level the laptop was held and the intensities into the body, depending on how the laptop was held. And you can see that especially the reproductive organs are getting exposed. There's also the issue of cumulative exposure. So it used to be when I first started researching this, we were just dealing with cell phones. Then there was Wi-Fi, laptops, we have smart things, we have all manner of devices that we're being exposed to. This is showing increased exposure with a phone plus a laptop. So you have just the cell phone. This is sort of a slice of the brain that engineers look at with those same colors. A laptop, and then a phone plus a laptop, which has more exposure. Yet the regulations we have don't consider this cumulative exposure from multiple devices. They just look at one device at a time when phones come on the market. The majority of studies have shown impacts from wireless radiation, be it oxidative stress, genetic, neurological, or reproductive and development, sperm damage, damage to the ovarian follicles. There are a lot of experimental animals in experiments done in rats and mice, because of course we can't expose our children to see what the effects would be. But in effect, we are in a massive experiment without controls right now, where we are all exposed And the research that they do on humans is always after the fact, of course. There's studies on cancer, on damage to brain cells, on case studies that show tumors where people held the cell phone. Young women who put the cell phone in their bra who developed breast cancer right underneath where they hold the phone. This is a poster from a Kaiser Permanente researcher who's done extensive work, Dr. Deekun Lee and his colleagues, showing that when the phone was placed on one side of the body, the colorectal cancer rate was 12 times as much in their evaluation. And there's also studies on impacts to birds, bees, and trees, wildlife. This is a three-part study by Blake Levitt, Henry Lai, and Albert Manville, who was the former U.S. fish and wildlife expert in the United States, that found over 1,200 studies showing effects. If you're interested in this, please go to the International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields that has some of our top experts who have come together to work on this issue. The EMF Scientist Appeal is hundreds of scientists who are calling for protections, reducing exposure. There's the 5G appeal. There's our website, Environmental Health Sciences, where we have resources, fact sheets for you to learn more about this issue. What we need to do is put children and their future at the center of the decision-making process as we move forward with technology. Because when you think about technology is moving out so fast without any pre-market safety testing, post-market evaluation or surveillance, both for people or for animals, ecological damage, and putting them first and looking at what the impacts will be is how our approach should be to setting limits. Because right now, the way that limits are set in most countries is that so long as it meets these limits, which is only about heat, overheating, then the device, the technology can come through. And we've had such a massive change in technology, and yet our limits and our approach to protecting public health, which is not happening right now, is completely antiquated. And thank you for your attention to this issue.
All right. Let's see. Just going to share my screen first. Hey, thank you, Theodora. Excellent, and all the other speakers we've had already. So tough acts to follow. But so I'm an author, and I have written several books so far, and I'm going to be presenting today from my latest book, which is called The Red Shoes, Our Devil's Dance with Technology and How We Can Stop It, from a chapter 10, which is called Anti-Social Media. And so it's about toxic algorithms, negative feedback loops, and downward spirals. So like I said, I'm an author. My background's in journalism and writing, and actually I was harmed by electromagnetic fields from smart tech, specifically in 2014. And that led me into my research into EMF harm and eventually into the addiction topic, because I saw that there was a public resistance to learning about EMF harm. I thought at first everybody would want to hear what I found out when I was injured myself, and I had to keep moving off grid to get away from it, farther and farther away from the encroachment. And so what I saw was similar to cigarettes in the past. There was addiction driving denial, and people when they're addicted, don't want to hear about harm. So I started researching into addiction. So my latest book uses the fable of the red shoes as a backdrop to the story I feel like we're all living now, which is like an out of control dance with our tech. So the girl in the story, she trades her handmade life, which is represented in her handmade shoes, for the promise and ease, comfort, excitement embodied in what ultimately end up being the cursed store-bought red shoes. And these keep her trapped in the shoes and dancing her to her own destruction. So I see that as very analogous with our current relationship with technology and reversing these roles of tool and master. So I cover every possible aspect of this relationship in my book, which is really dense. But today I'm just going to focus on toxic algorithms and young people. So with any of these apps, social media, gaming, news, entertainment, they're all designed with one key metric in mind, and that is to maximize user engagement. In other words, to win the war of the eyeballs, as tech developers call it. They're designed to be addictive, and that's the key point. And this design happens, as with any addictive product, is done at any cost, no matter what the harm to the user. And the youngest demographics possible, as young as 6, are intentionally targeted by tech companies to get them hooked early and for life. Meta, which is the parent company to Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, calls this keeping them in the family, moving through its family of products as they grow. So starting like with Messenger Kids to Instagram to Facebook. Embedded in all of these things, from email to search engines and gaming and shopping, is actually a casino slot machine design. So this means that we don't know when we're going to get these dopamine triggering rewards. So rewards can be likes, comments, even just finding what you're searching for. Tristan Harris, as a former Google product manager, said, "Every time I check my phone, I'm playing a slot machine to see what did I get." And this underscores the concept that uncertainty is captivating, and it highlights what these tech companies actually do is they exploit this, our ability to be addicted to novelty. Research into Vegas slot machines actually found that heavy users surprisingly didn't like to win because it broke the repetitive spell of the game, which is also known as the ludic loop. This is something that lulls the user into a dreamlike pleasure state, also called the machine zone, or with social media, the Facebook zone. But the key difference is that with a slot machine, you eventually run out of coins, but with our tech, there are no stopping cues. And something called IVR, and that's intermittent variable rewards, is key to this design. This is what makes gambling so addictive, and the same is true with our tech apps. So these, again, are likes, comments, notifications, and they're delivered on a schedule most likely to strengthen addiction. They're not delivered in real time, which is what few people appreciate. So the program actually will predict when a user might sign off and prompt them with push notifications to ping them to keep them on. They do this to young users in the middle of the night to prompt re-engagement with the platform, intentionally disrupting sleep. So addiction harms with social media feed. Meta's own research points to something they call problematic use, or PU, as in yes, it stinks, and this refers to addiction. And 25% of Facebook users, they're seeing this, and as mainly in the younger demographics from 9 and up. It can cause, according to their own research, loss of productivity, sleep disruptions, relationship impacts, and safety risks. And the feeds themselves induce negative comparisons to unrealistic ideals of beauty, talent, success, and fitness. And these are all highly amplified by the algorithms. The algorithmic design is engagement-based, or what they call MSI, meaningful social interaction. And that's according to tech's own definitions, of course, not ours. So instead of being chronologically based like they were initially, they create algorithms that favor sharing and posting the most sensational content. It thinks will get the most reactions and shares, what they also call downstream engagement or network value. So they'll ignore, and they have done, ignore teen users, especially wishes for better user controls to actually lead them to more positive content. So teen users have asked for these controls. They want to see positive content, but instead of being led there, the design of the algorithms is to favor content to keep them hooked, and will actually override their explicit preferences because their predictions of what will get shared and engaged with disagree. One Meta employee says no one wakes up thinking they want to maximize the number of times they open Instagram that day, but that's exactly what our product teams are trying to do. And they admit to having only cared about things like time spent to define success. The algorithm, the feeds are maximized. They started with maximizing a user's time spent in one session to maximizing as many use sessions as possible, while full well knowing that frequency of sessions was a strong indicator of problematic use or addiction. So the infinite scroll, this was designed as a trance induction to induce a trance or flow state, as they call it. So this is actually meant to distort a user's sense of time while on the product. And the interface is designed to not interrupt this flow unless the interruption furthers the engagement, like displaying comments or likes. The designer of the infinite scroll said it was like taking behavioral cocaine and just sprinkling it all over your interface. And that's the thing that keeps coming back. It doesn't give your brain time to catch up with your impulses. You just keep scrolling. And that scroll, information is bottomless. You can never really finish it. 70 to 95% of the content viewed is coming from these recommendations and not what users want to see, so it's rather what they cannot look away from. This is called feeding the spiral. So from the tech company's perspectives, it doesn't matter why we're engaged. It's just if we could be delighted, horrified, angry, or upset, it's the engagement itself is the end goal. And this happens even when users reject recommended content that is actually seen as interest. So they'll get more of the same to appear. And this leads to a vicious cycle, what Meta itself calls a horrible feedback loop or downward spiral, aka feeding the spiral. It means the user will be flooded with unwanted content that makes them feel bad. And this is especially problematic for those at risk of self-injury or suicide. The bottom line is that negative downward spiral loops drive up user engagement, resulting in more growth or ad revenue. Rabbit holes from hell. So Meta called its study into these downward spirals the Rabbit Hole Project, which found that its recommendations algorithms would start pushing you down a rabbit hole of more egregious content. And it also found that their Instagram app features elevated risk of suicide and self-injury in certain users, with the app having a consistent bias in favor of harmful content, creating an echo chamber of suicide and self-harm content, which leads to one story out of many, unfortunately, the tragic story of Molly Russell. At age 14, she killed herself after binge watching suicide and self-injury content pushed on her by Instagram and other platforms. The coroner actually ruled that Molly died from an act of self-harm while suffering from depression and the negative effects of online content pushed on her by social media algorithms and not sought out herself, fostering binge periods of self-harm content viewing, some of which was particularly graphic. This is important, portraying the self-harm as inevitable, stemming from a condition from which no recovery was available. And this is just the last slide, actually, is just saying why kids are most vulnerable to toxic design, which we've heard before is about the prefrontal cortex not being developed. So thank you so much.
Jenny was fine until she went to high school. And for a year or so, she was absolutely fine. But then the school decided to become an academy. And when they decided to become an academy, they asked the parents, is that okay? When they decided to put Wi-Fi in, they didn't bother to ask the parents, is that okay? So unknown to us, at the same time, we got Wi-Fi at home for a short time because the school was setting all the homework online. And I had seen the very important, groundbreaking Panorama Wi-Fi, a warning signal, which was made in 2007, but then there were no other warnings particularly. So I had it swimming in the back of my head that there was something about Wi-Fi, but I was assured by everybody it was safe. So it went in the autumn half term, and just 2 months later at Christmas, we noticed she was just slightly different. She wasn't quite the same caring Jenny. She was a bit annoyed at having to go to see both grandmothers over that Christmas, which was unusual for her. And then the symptoms came in the new year. After just 2 months of exposure, she would start to get headaches. One day she'd come home with a headache. Another day she would have aches and pains in her joints. Another day she would have a detention because she had to leave the classroom to go to the toilet. At the time, I didn't understand that urine urgency was a symptom of electrohypersensitivity, or as we now know, it's also called EMR syndrome, or Havana syndrome, or microwave sickness. The other symptoms she suffered were sensitivity to shampoo chemicals. So I had to buy organic shampoos and conditioners because she would develop a rash. She then had anomia at school where she couldn't think of what she wanted to say. She had difficulty concentrating. And so she would wait and get her work and then go and find a classroom that didn't have loads of people with smartphones and Wi-Fi in and do her work. That incurred loads of detentions. And in the end, we had to have a detention spreadsheet. She was a fiercely independent child. So although I tried to help, she wanted to try to sort it out herself. So eventually she was doing her homework on her laptop at home using Wi-Fi, and she had a nosebleed. She came downstairs and she said, I haven't picked my nose, I haven't banged it, why have I got a nosebleed? We don't have a history in the family. I had a job to stop it. She said, I'm going to Google it. So we looked it up and we came across websites because we put in Wi-Fi laptop nosebleed, and we came up with websites, Wired Child, we came across Camillaries and a whole bunch of others. And so we decided we would switch the Wi-Fi off at home, and we did that. And she'd also had some difficulty sleeping. And that was the other reason I had a list of things, because of the headaches and because of her difficulty sleeping, which she'd never ever had before. I had a whole list of things. The last thing on the list was this newfangled Wi-Fi. So we switched it off. We got Ethernet cables and she could immediately sleep again. And so I decided to contact the National Radiological Protection Board, because I'm a dental nurse by profession. So I knew exactly who to go to about radiation. So they sent me the research that they'd done, and I was not impressed. I was actually quite disgusted and had a row with one of the researchers on the telephone. And she was trying to infer that I was inferring that it was ionizing radiation. I said, no, I understand it's non-ionizing radiation, but I'm not happy. All they'd done was taken a few measurements from a Wi-Fi laptop in a laboratory, and then it was rolled out into schools. And that was just one school it was rolled into, and then it was rolled out. And eventually the detentions and the whole thing became unbearable. I tried to educate the school. I took in science. I asked them to switch the Wi-Fi off and was told they couldn't switch it off for one child. I said, you wouldn't be switching it off for one child. It would benefit everybody's health in the school. And unfortunately, unbeknown to me, there was a very low water tower and they decided to switch a 4G mast on. That was the final straw for Jenny. On the Sunday, they switched the 4G mast on. She went to school on Monday, wasn't feeling at all well. She went out on an outing on the Tuesday and was absolutely fine. Wednesday, went back to school, was exposed to the school's Wi-Fi, which they refused to switch off, and the new 4G mast. Thursday, she decided not to go to school. I had a phone call from the school, and then I phoned them. Eventually, it became clear that she hadn't made it to school, so I went out looking for her, and I found her having fallen from a tree, hung from that tree. Jenny left us a will, and she was very determined that at the funeral I would read out this, which I will just put my glasses on to read. So she said, before our white brothers arrived to make us civilized men, we didn't have any kind of prison. Because of this, we had no delinquents. Without a prison, there can be no delinquents. We had no locks nor keys, and therefore among us there were no thieves. When someone was so poor that he couldn't afford a horse, a tent, or a blanket, he, in that case, received it all as a gift. We were too uncivilized to give great importance to private property. We didn't know any kind of money, and consequently the value of a human being was not determined by his wealth. We had no written laws laid down, no lawyers, no politicians. Therefore, we were not able to cheat and swindle one another. We were really in bad shape before the white men arrived, and I don't know how to explain how we were able to manage without these fundamental things that, so they tell us, are so necessary for a civilized society. And that was written by John Fire, Lane Deer, Sue Lakota. And I wrote for her funeral this poem for Jenny. This woeful wireless world has filled your head with pain. If we'd have kept you wired, you wouldn't have grown tired and still be here to remain. My helpful angel on this earth, now heaven has you, not your place of birth. Look after her, God, until we leave this domain to join her once again. Love forever, Mum. I talk about Jenny's death, her suicide accident, and her electrosensitivity to try to raise awareness and try desperately to get children protected. I've been campaigning now for over 12 years, 10 years since Jenny died. And thankfully, I always take, if I'm doing a physical talk, I take papyrus, which is the prevention of young suicide material, with me. And we've had another electrosensitive child who picked up that material and spoke to her parents. So another suicide averted. It's extremely important that we all fight to protect our children. It's not just smartphones. It's not just Wi-Fi. It's Alexa, it's Xbox, it's Fitbits, it's everything. Anything wireless should not be around our children unless it's an emergency. We could have preloaded tablets. There's no need for Wi-Fi to be in a hospital or in a school. We can have Ethernet cabled technology. And we have to ban children under the age of 16, at least, from the adult World Wide Web. It is an evil place. And we wouldn't just dump a child in a shopping centre and leave them to fend for themselves. That's exactly what we're doing by giving our children access to the adult World Wide Web and to this very lethal and harmful technology. It's not just about the radiation and what they're finding online, but this is stealing a child's childhood away from them. So I work with AIDS International. I try to be there to help guide them how to protect our children. As I say, it's not just smartphones. We need to protect them from Wi-Fi and all kinds of harms coming from this technology. We at AIDS are busy trying to wake up schools and wake up the world to protect our children, because if we don't protect them, it doesn't look like government is going to protect them anytime soon. But I would add, do look at Prince Harry and Professor Jonathan Haidt. Go onto YouTube and look up Prince Harry, Professor Jonathan Haidt. There's a very good interview between the two of them on how to protect children from anti-social media.
Hello, I'm Bronwyn Desjardins, Head of EdTech for Smartphone Free Childhood South Africa. I currently reside on the small island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. My calling is to help families and schools reclaim childhood and transform education into a place where connection comes before distraction and where technology supports, not replaces, real well-being. I want to begin with a story. A few years ago, I spent a weekend at my cousin's cottage in the Drakensberg. It's off the contour path and it requires an off-road vehicle to get there. There is no electricity and no cellular signal. We had paraffin lamps, candles, gas oven, and a gas fridge and a fireplace. There was a panoramic view and the sound of the sunset. Yes, you can hear the sunset. It's in the quiet stillness as the day shifts into the night, as the birds sing their calls to nest, guinea fowl chatter as they scuttle off, and the frog song begins. In those 48 unplugged hours, life slowed. I found time to read, cook, play cards, and connect with my family at a depth I hadn't felt in ages. I noticed the sunset and the sunrise, listened to my own thoughts, and felt my mind reset. We're living at Wi-Fi speed now, But our bodies, our minds aren't built for it. We remember the ancient natural rhythm, one we need to find again. This is where our schools shine. They provide safe places for young people to learn about themselves through friendships, play, problem solving, face-to-face lessons and activities. At break time, they can be outside to reconnect with nature, with grass under their feet, sunlight on their skin, fresh air in their lungs. Here they move, explore, talk, run, and build emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills. Trusted, vetted adults are there to guide and care for them. Schools can be sanctuaries for empathy, compassion, curiosity, and play, teaching skills for life, not just teaching to test. Technology isn't the enemy, though, especially for students with learning needs and those in remote parts of the global south. Tech opens doors, accessibility tools, STEM skills, lessons with teachers miles away, peer support across countries. These are gifts we want every child to access when the time is right and in the right way. However, AI-powered apps are designed to capture and hold attention. If schools don't set mindful boundaries, our students' precious focus and time can be lost. We need to teach digital literacy, resilience, and put education first. When screens rule every moment, real play and honest conversation fade. Children lose hours that could feel full, not frantic. Their bodies and spirits ache for the rhythm of nature and true connection. Smartphone-free childhood isn't anti-tech. It's a slow-tech, low-tech approach to childhood. We say, it's not no forever, just not now. We ask parents to delay access to smartphones until high school and social media until 16. For schools to create playgrounds and classrooms for imagination, freedom, and self-expression. Our mission is to let childhood be about making memories of their own, instead of watching others online creating theirs. The Parent Pact and our phone-free school network support families and schools in practical ways. We ask parents and schools to pause, delay smartphones, set device boundaries, and create playgrounds for imagination and joy. The Parent Pact and our phone-free school network support families to go slow tech together. And this isn't just theory. At last count, over 4,000 parents have signed the pact nationwide, and 26 schools have already signed up for Phone-Free School Initiative, joining a growing community dedicated to restoring balance in children's lives. At SFCSA, we begin by listening. What do children, teachers, and parents really need? Our solutions, slow tech, phone-free schools, creative play, are co-created, always open for feedback and revision. Progress is deep, not just fast. When schools and families choose to unplug and uplift, the results are clear. Families and teachers in the movement consistently report fewer anxieties, deeper play, longer concentration, and the development of real social bonds. Our schools, fields, and classrooms become vibrant laboratories for empathy, teamwork, creativity, and innovation. By having the courage to slow down, we open the door to deeper connections and greater kindness. When we postpone smartphones and create device-free spaces, we nurture movement and empathy and cultivate communities where students feel more connected, present, and engaged with each other and their learning. All of this is possible when we make the conscious choice to unplug, to uplift together. Our schools can be places where childhood and nature are restored and technology uplifts everyone. Thank you.
Wow. I think that's given us all a lot of food for thought. Amazing. And lovely to end that section with actions that people are organizations are taking, which leads us on to our final presentations, in which we'll hear from some other organizations around the world who are doing incredible work in this arena as well, such as Caroline Fallon from Kids Unplugged Belgium, who'll share her journey with her own children around tech, as well as what's going on in Ireland, which is her homeland. After that, we'll hear from Antoine Mestre, board member of the French NGO Lève les Yeux, which means raise your eyes, which I think is brilliant. And Robert Broad of Look Up Hong Kong, in his case, in a short video about what's going on in Hong Kong, as unfortunately he can't be with us today. And last but definitely not least, David Charalambous from the UK, whose expertise includes behavioural science and the dynamics of communication. And he'll conclude with a presentation on how we can best communicate with others on difficult and controversial topics, such as those we've covered today. So Caroline, you're next.
Thanks, Amanda. So I'm Caroline Fallon. I'm a parent of two, originally from Ireland, now living in Belgium. I taught in secondary schools in Ireland for about 15 years. I'm involved with Kids Unplugged in Belgium since last year. So Kids Unplugged is a sister organisation of Smartphone Free Childhood in the UK. It was set up last year by a lady called Lise Reines, who I'm delighted is spearheading the campaign in Belgium. It gives me great comfort when I see how invested she is and the team and how much work they do behind the scenes. I do as much as I can in a supportive role at local and regional level. So this topic of smartphones and children has really worried me for about 8 years now, maybe. And so being a part of this movement has been really uplifting. It's connected me with so many parents who are now having a conversation finally about the topic. Parents are creating groups at schools all across Belgium. They're signing pacts through the Kids Unplugged website to agree to delay buying a smartphone for their child before 14. And it's a really great feeling when the parents in your child's friend group all agree to this, because after years of worrying about it, it's really a huge weight off my shoulders. We know that our children are mainly concerned with what their friends are doing. And if nobody in their group has a phone, then immediately the press to power lessons. And so the collective movement is really powerful. Of course, in Belgium, there are several language communities. And so Kids Unplugged was rolled out in the Flemish schools in December last year. There are over 300 schools involved in some way now with Kids Unplugged across Belgium. There are almost 1,000 parents signed. And this is before it's even been rolled out officially to the Francophone schools, the German schools, or the international schools. So work is ongoing at the moment on the website for all those other school communities, and we expect in 2026 that we'll see a big growth in numbers. Kids Unplugged has also written an open letter to the Flemish government, which has been signed by 500 Belgian doctors and other professionals. It's also important to note, like the other organisations, that Kids Unplugged are not anti-tech. This movement is really more about giving choice back to parents again. Up until really last year or the year before, the choice to not give a child a smartphone had been taken away from parents by virtue of the sheer number of children who have them. So the collective movement allows parents to engage a critical mass and to provide support for themselves, but also then for their children and teens. Meanwhile, in Ireland, Smartphone Free Childhood is also going from strength to strength. There are almost 3,000 packs signed in Ireland, and this doesn't take into account all the school groups which have organised independent packs themselves around the country. So hopefully Smartphone Free Childhood Ireland are aiming to unite all of those groups under one umbrella this year. For me personally, these parental movements are really powerful. They do make me feel hopeful about the future. I do probably still have some secret hopes myself about the way things might go. One of my biggest concerns at the moment is that standards have dropped so drastically in terms of what's appropriate and acceptable for children in the last 15 years that we've almost forgotten what standards we used to have for protecting children. A lot of countries now are talking about raising the age limit of social media, but I really worry that as long as children own their own smart device, that there will always be ways for them to access inappropriate content. You know, the internet isn't censored, it's not regulated in any way. Like I myself in recent years have stumbled across porn in 2 clicks in a Google search, just 2 clicks and not on any social media platform. So if you think that, you know, a 5-year-old is watching a Disney film on television and porn comes on just for a minute, you know, that would be considered absolutely unacceptable. But when it comes to the internet, we apply a completely different standard. And I've never quite understood why. So while I find it really positive that a lot of countries are discussing change, I worry that age verification for platforms will muddy the waters with potential GDPR issues when really child protection should be the absolute priority. in my own opinion, I think the key thing to tackle here is the ownership element. You know, owning a device creates a completely different relationship with technology for children. It offers them a real sense of protection and security in their online activities. And if we think for a minute of how we use our own phones, they're like an extension of our arm. We know every app, every button. Now think of how you use a phone when it belongs to a friend or a colleague. You know, then we're so much more cautious. We're nowhere near as confident with the device. We're really aware of accidentally hitting the wrong thing, and we certainly wouldn't go searching for sinister content on somebody else's phone. So children would be the same. I think their behaviors online would be very, very different if they knew that the device belonged to family and would be used by someone after them. So I wonder if we could raise the age for owning the device. Would that be the best thing? And for allowing a grace period for those under 16 to adapt, and then, you know, to think about transferring medical apps to some device other than a smartphone. For me, with my own children, I've done my best to stay off the screen debate at home. You know, we don't have Wi-Fi as a default. We just use the hotspot, and we try to kind of not ever use the phones. Like they don't have passwords. You know, they don't have unsupervised free access to the internet, and I think that really helps when something is not there as default. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Antoine is up next.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for all the speakers and their testimonies and the organization. So I'm a board member of Lève les Yeux, which is a French NGO I will present just after. I'm the co-founder of Heretic. I'm also a teacher at Sciences Po Paris, and I'm not a father yet. Hopefully it will come soon, but I'm an elder brother. So I was supposed to talk only about Lève les Yeux, but Kate insisted I tell you a little bit more about Heretic. I'll do that after that. So Lève les Yeux is a French NGO. We were born in 2018, just before COVID. Our mission became even more relevant since then. We are based in Marseille and also present in Paris, Lyon, Bordeaux, Nice, and Nantes. So we started Lève les Yeux based on the clear view of the implications and impacts of screens and digital services in everything from health, education, human relationships, environment, and democracy. And our goal is to promote disconnection in order to better preserve human attention. So our main activities, what we do is running prevention workshops for children, teenagers, teachers, and parents using playful and participatory methods, running workshops for employees in companies and public administrations, publishing books, articles, and book reviews on digital technologies' impacts, and raising national awareness through the collective attention. So some of the latest projects we did, there are quite a lot of them, but the latest from last year, one on the left is called More Books, Less Screens. We did it with the National Center for Reading, and we'll continue doing it in 2025 and 26. And the second one is called Raise Your Eyes at Home. And the idea is not only to do workshops, but for families to be gathered around some common rules. And so we started in 2018, and last year overall we impacted over 2,000 people, mostly youngsters, but also adults, obviously. And one of the organizations we co-founded too is called the Collective Attention, which is basically a French pro-disconnection movement, bringing together health prevention organizations, associations working on electromagnetic exposure, environmental groups, and we do political advocacy through this collective. And we also organize events, and this one, namely the Attention Summit. So the 4th edition will be held in the 24th of January. So you're all welcome if you're in Paris. And the idea is to open this discussion to all the public society. One of the key value we have at Lève les Yeux is independence, because we saw quite a lot of NGOs born in those latest years, and most of them are funded by the tech industry, and so we consider they do not have an unbiased discourse, and so we really want to preserve this independence from tech industry funding. On the other hand, I'm the co-founder of Heretic, which is a company that imagines, crafts, and shares digital alternatives freed from the Silicon Valley dogma. And so we do that through research, art, and design. And so I'm just going to show you some projects to show we can distort technology to make other things that capture people's attention. So, and to go from a model that is imperialistic, extractive, soilless, reductionist, and obsessive to a model that hopefully will be more collective, projective, rooted, rich, and relevant. So some projects we did, one is called Co-Color. So basically we work with an American artist called Rosie Lamb for youngsters, but their family also to take a look at work of art and to dedicate their attention to those works of art. We create tools. For instance, this one is called Derive. So it's a Flannery app. So the idea is to help you take your time when you walk and not depend on Google's algorithms, capturing your data and your attention and making you accelerate all day. And so it's free and there's no algorithm, no personal data involved. We try to take content out of the screens too. So this project is a music box. So basically the idea is to create other artifacts than screens to have access to content. We create some mini tools. This one will echo Diego Hidalgo's off button. So the idea is just we created a little bot that automatically says you're not available on WhatsApp, which is obviously a feature that should be included because there's this spiral of expectation, and basically the idea is to turn you off. And with some education, mostly provocative, this one is called Algoville. So the idea is to embody algorithms. So you can see the dealer of dopamine over there. You can see the admin, salesman on the top left. And the idea is to teach children new ways of considering their relationship with their tools. And we try to use some humor too. So this one is a critical performance we did recently well, it's not interesting. And the last one is called the Alternatives Gallery. And so the idea is to say we have plenty, and some of them are here today, plenty of people and plenty of ways of fighting against this Silicon Valley dogma. And so we want just to give access to a lot of the kind of struggles that are happening. And
you froze momentarily.
Basically, I was saying we are oscillating between open despair, and hopefully it will go for the upside because we have to stay optimistic. And the last one is about the Overton window. So during all those years, the tech industry made the unthinkable thinkable. And I think now we are the ones trying to make the unthinkable thinkable. And it should not just be thinkable, it should be normal. And hopefully it will be ever more normal in the weeks, years to come. So thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I'm Robert, the founder of a parent-led grassroots movement called Look Up Hong Kong. Thank you for having me today. I've been living in Hong Kong for almost 30 years, and it is an amazing city of 8 million people and more than 1,000 schools. We're also a city of contrasts. We are known for being the city of skyscrapers, but we're less known for being spread across 200 islands. We're also a city of wild open spaces. 75% of Hong Kong is farmland, country parks, and beautiful, beautiful tropical beaches. But we have a smartphone problem. We have a smartphone penetration rate of 293%. That's 3 phones for every person in Hong Kong. So I founded Look Up Hong Kong about 18 months ago to start to build awareness and shift the culture around smartphones and social media for our kids in Hong Kong. With a group of passionate parents, we set out to champion childhood in Hong Kong and help families prepare our children for a digital future that puts their well-being first. We built our movement around 4 pillars initially: delaying access to smartphones, delaying social media, supporting smartphone-free spaces, particularly schools in Hong Kong, and advocating for real-world outdoor experiences for our children. But as time went on, we started to realize that it was the parents that needed support, and much of our effort now focuses on a 5th pillar: equipping parents with the knowledge and language that they need to mentor their kids and families around these technologies, and also showing parents how to model more mindful, balanced use of technology themselves, so that our kids grow up seeing smartphones as a tool, not a toy. So we embarked on an effort to really understand the dynamics across the whole of Hong Kong. We wanted to see the parental use of the devices and also how that was manifesting and influencing the kids' use of the devices. We interviewed a truly representative set of parents across Chinese, English, international, and local schools, 651 families in total, to understand their use. And what we found is that parents in Hong Kong are struggling. 65% of them spend too much time on their phones. 76% of them say they cannot live without their phones. And they're feeling the impact on their own well-being. 67% see the impact on their physical health. More than half say it impacts their mental health. It's affecting their work performance. It's affecting their social relationships. They see the problems and they're concerned about the risks for their kids. Online safety is a big concern in Hong Kong, as is the impact of these technologies on their physical health and academic performance. But despite the concerns, our kids get phones in Hong Kong earlier. The average age of ownership in Hong Kong is 9 years, compared to around 11 to 12 years in other developed countries, including places like Korea and Japan. And the smartphone penetration rate amongst our kids is higher. 86% of our 11 to 13-year-olds in Hong Kong have smartphones versus 60 to 70% in other developed countries. Many of the kids are also exceeding guideline recommendations on smartphone screen use. 45% of them are spending more than 2 hours a day on these devices. But sadly and alarmingly, I think, more than a third of our kids do not go outdoors more than once a week. But our survey has also given us reason for hope. There is hope in the fact that 84% of our parents say delaying these technologies would benefit the well-being of their kids. There is also hope in the fact that our heaviest parental users are also the most likely to support delaying access for their kids. And there is hope in the overwhelming support for the pillars of our work: delaying access to smartphones and social media for as long as possible, advocating for smartphone-free schools, and doing it together as a community. Our work is only just beginning here in Hong Kong, but I know if we work together, we can change the culture around these technologies for our children. I'm sorry I wasn't able to join you in person today, but if you'd like to send me any questions, please do. I'd welcome the chance to tell you more. Thank you and good night.
So now we've got David, who's going to give us even more tools. Carry on, David.
Hello. The art of communicating. So most activists do not have an information problem. They have a communication problem. We have so much information, we have an abundance of it. The question is, how do we get this information out of our minds into other people's minds so they change their views and their behaviors? And this quote is so profound. The two words information and communication are often used interchangeably, but they signify quite different things. Information is given out, communication is getting through. How do you get through so that information lands into someone's mind? Now, what I'm going to do today is just give you 3 really powerful ways to actually have information land into people's minds. But what I do have on our website at this link is a very good document that will have a point-by-point guide on really how to make conversations work, particularly about controversial and difficult subjects. Now, we're going to use 2 characters. We've got Jane and Joe. Now, usually what happens is that we will stand on what we call our soapboxes and we will present facts to each other. Now, hopefully, a lot of people realize now that that's not a very efficient way to get people to change their ways. It's not really about information. It's about experiences, people having things that move them. And it was really when we look beyond the fact. So if Jane presents a fact to Joe and Joe doesn't believe it, or Joe interprets this fact differently to Jane, why? And a lot of it's because we don't think about what's in our soapbox. And our soapbox is a metaphor that represents our knowledge, our beliefs, our opinions about the world, our opinions about ourselves. So if Joe believes that smartphones are useful and they're not harmful in any way, and he believes that EMFs are safe because, you know, that's what he's read, and he thinks that scientists are always right, they can never make mistakes or they can never be influenced, then he's going to have a very different worldview from Jane, who knows that tech is now starting to reduce the quality of life for many people. She knows that EMFs affect biology, and she also knows that industry influences science. I mean, in 2023, I think 10,000 papers were retracted. So what you begin to see now at a deeper level is that the fact is going to be interpreted very differently. And this is why a fact presented to someone will be really haphazard to how it lands. And what I'm going to do is show you 3 ways that you can actually wrap that fact in information or present it in a different way where it has a much better chance of getting through. So the 3 most powerful ways to reach another. Number 1 is questions. Now, questions act as conversational keys. They unlock information that would otherwise remain hidden. They invite the other party into a collaborative process, turning monologue into dialogue and fostering engagement. And questions guide attention, and this is so powerful, and they can reconnect people to their thought process. And a lot of the time, there actually isn't a thought process. And you might ask someone what they think about something, they realize they actually don't think anything about it. They've just been conditioned by stories and TV to think a certain way. Now, a quick story is I was given a workshop a couple of years ago, and there was a lady there that was challenging a lot of the councils in the UK around their policies. And she told a story that before the workshop, she had lobbied 51 of the local councillors and had no success. And then I asked her this question. I said, how effective has presenting information to those councillors been? And a light bulb went off in her mind. She realised that that was the elusive obvious. It just wasn't working what she was doing. I said to her, well, you've got to find a way to get information into that person's mind, into their map, as it were. And she completely changed her process. And when I last spoke to her, she'd got through to 17 of those councillors and actually flipped their vote, whereas previously it was 51 against. So questions can be so powerful for so many reasons. And here's a really important tip. Do not ask the why question regarding behavior. It will usually trigger defense. When you ask someone why they're doing something or why they believe something, a lot of the time they don't know, and they're going to come up with rationalizations to actually, you know, solidify a good foundation to that. So really use what, how, and when. So the second one is metaphor. Now this is so powerful, and I remember attending a scientific presentation a few years ago, and a lady spoke for 2 hours on a very important subject. And 2 days later, I could not remember one thing that she had said, but I remember it being a very good presentation. Then a businessman came on and spoke for 1 minute, and I can still tell you today what he said and what it meant, because he used a metaphor. Metaphors drive behavior and cognitive change. There is a compass in a dark forest. It helps us plot new courses. It's really how we think a lot of the time through metaphor. It shapes judgment and decision making. Metaphor is a tinted lens through which we view a scene, and it enhances memory and learning. Metaphor makes information sticky. It creates a route for recall. So the example of this ski metaphor is when I was in this presentation, the businessman said, well, that thing is like an avalanche fence being put in the town. It's just not going to do anything because it's too late. And that metaphor allowed me to understand what he meant and the point he was making, and I can still remember it today. So practice writing out facts that create a metaphor. Yeah, write the fact out, then create a metaphor that will carry that information deeper into the person's mind. Because the actual origin of the term metaphor means to carry over. And this is why so many statements by companies and government agencies will use metaphor, because they know it's very powerful and it's very, very sticky. So the third one is so powerful. And if you review what's happened tonight, the most powerful experiences you've had are the powerful stories. They move you at a level that you can't really explain. So there's a thing called narrative transportation theory, and it's the deep absorption into stories that changes attitudes and beliefs. It's really the moral of the story. And for thousands of years, information was passed down from one generation to the next through stories. There's much evidence that To Kill a Mockingbird is frequently credited with creating a more fertile ground for acceptance of civil rights. There's studies on Harry Potter has been shown to change perceptions around certain cultures, and Uncle Tom's Cabin, a 1852 novel, is credited with shifting public opinion against slavery. The brain is literally wired for story. So spreading information efficiently is stories that are easy to recall and retell. But what they do is they change people's unconscious minds. And what you have nowadays is this is really the narrative transportation theory as a science. And if you watch any TV now, you're going to see the same agendas popping up time and time and time again. And you're going to see the term conspiracy theorist used time and time and time again to create people's perception of that. And then that's going to be attached to anyone that questions industry, really, EMFs, etc. And that's why people respond by calling you a conspiracy theorist. They're not thinking. They're responding to the conditioning via the stories. That's why this quote on the left from Plato says, those that tell the stories rule society. So we have to share our experiences and stories because it gives people a deep movement in their feeling towards certain subjects. So stories also provide context and meaning. They link new facts to familiar frameworks for deeper understanding. They change us at deep levels. And we naturally tell stories when we meet with friends and family. Whenever we're talking, we're generally telling lots of stories. But once we start to share facts, we somehow go into this academic mode, and it doesn't work. So really the tip is that don't do that. Just tell and share your information through powerful stories and experiences. Now, within the film and literature industries, they have a thing that they say, show, do not tell. Now, if you tell someone something, you'll probably know that it's not been very effective. But showing is to tell a story. And when you tell someone a story, the resistance lowers and they absorb the story. And you can't actually decide consciously how you feel about a story. It happens automatically. And I've had numerous friends shift many views by just telling them true stories. And I remember one guy a few years ago, he said to me, oh, I'm informed about all this because I watch the news most of the day. And then I told him a story from Shara Atkinson's brilliant book called Slanted about how the media generally only will present one side of a story or a slanted viewpoint, you know, from whoever the advertisers are. And I bumped into him about, 6 months later, and he'd done a 180 shift on so many of his views, and how much that story had as an effect, who knows. But stories are so powerful, and they really are where a lot of the moral backbone of people, where we come. And that's why we have to look at where are the children getting their stories nowadays? Who are their role models? Who are they wanting to be like? And when we start to tell better stories, I think we're going to see better outcomes for everyone involved. So for further information, you can visit reachingpeople.net, or you can email me if you have any questions at david@reachingpeople.net. Hopefully these three things were helpful: questions, metaphors, and stories. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, all of you. To all our incredibly knowledgeable and inspiring speakers. We at Safe Tech International are aware that when we get a lot of information, which is all very thought-provoking, it can cause one to feel a bit overwhelmed. So before we move on to the Q&A, and I'm sure many of you have got burning questions, I'd like to suggest that perhaps each of us consider taking on one small action towards digital safety and sobriety to ground what we've learned into physical reality and regain more balance and harmony in our lives. So, for example, you could switch your phone off at night, or if you already do that, you could turn off your router at night. if you're not yet using an Ethernet cable, and we'll be sending information about what that means. But using wired-in technology to access the internet rather than wireless. I'd like to throw in the possibility of taking the digital detox challenge by not looking at your phone or your computer at night from after dinner, let's say, until after breakfast, and see how you feel. Or in the spirit of digital etiquette, you could request no phones at mealtimes or family gatherings. So whatever you choose to do, please do let us know how you get on. We'd really love to hear from you. And also, I'll just say this in case not everyone can stay on for the Q&A, but please do follow our speakers to keep in touch with the latest developments and support their work. Of course, not forgetting to participate in Diego's off February. And in addition to the recording of the webinar, we'll be making a shortened version with highlights, and we'll be sending you links to further resources, including links to relevant declarations and manifestos that we encourage you to sign. One of those is the petition set up by Tim Arnold, the independent filmmaker who I mentioned at the start, to protect a legal right to access services without a digital device. The deadline for that is November the 20th. And one final word now from Kate about another important similar initiative.
Thank you, Amanda. Bernard Noy and his team from France, Nantes Citizen Watch Collective, have created a manifesto on the right to be disconnected from the online world, the right for students to learn offline, both in schools and at home, and for adults to do banking, travel, work, and other transactions offline and so forth. Those of us who wish to live a more natural, less surveilled, and healthier lifestyle disconnected from the internet when and where we so choose must have that option as well. And now is the time to insist on retaining this right, or we may lose it forever. So please be on the lookout for ways you can support this initiative in your country as it takes root in France and other places, as well as the other manifestos, petitions, and declarations that Amanda mentioned. And so now let's move on to the questions. I think, Catherine, you'll be handling those.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to say first that, tech, all the tech creators don't allow their kids to have tech until much later. They go to Montessori schools. They realize that it interferes with creativity, and critical thinking skills, and that all this stuff can be learned much later very easily. It's very user-friendly. It's not like you got to give them a laptop or tablet as soon as they're born, or in nursery school or anything. It's just unnecessary. I mean, we see old people today that didn't grow up with it. It's easy for them to learn how to use it. So, again, like, is it necessary? I think that's a good question. Is it beneficial? Another question. And I see, and the illiteracy issue, like learning everything, just typing and tapping and touching screens creates illiteracy, because they're not learning to print. They're not spending time on printing, and that affects other motor skills as well, and affects brain development. So yeah, I'm in favor of more like just pushing it till later. Why try to, design a different kind that's going to be safer? Because if there is something like that, like we have things like YouTube Kids, and that's infiltrated by predators. So all these things can be infiltrated still. So it's going to be very difficult to have those blocks and be effective. But in terms of, I also love the statistics that Deborah brought up, because this is, for a lot of things happening now, it's like all these suicides, all these statistics of these, things happening, social ills that just don't seem to be, paid attention to at all, and addressed in a way that we would if, planes were going down and that many people were dying. We'd do something. So I forget the other part of that was, what was the other part? Oh, having and having, the phones can have a place if they're for emergencies, and then they wouldn't need to be so-called smart. We could have an emergency wireless system that wouldn't have to be so harmful. So definitely, if you feel like a child has to have one for some reason to contact you, there's no reason it needs to be so dangerous. It could be left on airplane mode when they're not using it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all I was going to add to the conversation. So thank you.
I'm Colleen from Santa Rosa, California. This has been very informative. I really appreciate all these wonderful speakers. Here in the United States, we have a FCC, Federal Communication Commission, that we really believe is a captured agency. They are really in the pocket of the high-tech industry, and they have a pending ruling that if this is not stopped, no city or county will ever be able to say no to them wherever they want to come in and put their cell phone towers, their 5G antennas. And I totally agree with all of you. This is causing horrible health impacts for anyone that is close to these terrible antennas. I've written a book about 5G called Whoa Nelly, and I just wish they would whoa a little and go back to some true investigation and true science. And they're, as we've heard, they're basing this whole theory on a 1966 or 1996 scientific ruling that had nothing to do with the truth about cell phones. And they've just gotten worse since. But my question is, do any of you in different countries have any group that you're dealing with, like the FCC, that is supposed to be regulating the high-tech industry, and they're not at all? And what would you suggest that we possibly do to try to stop this ruling from going through?
Would you like to answer that one, Theodora?
Well, I know there are other groups on the call, but there are definitely worldwide groups working on the issue of wireless and health. I don't have a list right in front of me right now, but my gosh, Belgium, Chile, South Africa, just groups everywhere that have come together. And there are often an entity, or maybe there's not an entity that they're dealing with. So in the United States, we have the FCC, which is under regulatory capture. There's a Harvard study called Captured Agency that details this. It's from now a decade ago, talking about how our current FCC commissioners are former wireless company executives and lawyers and so forth. And that has only continued over the last decade. So we have right now Brendan Carr, who is our chair of FCC, former lawyer who actually participated in suing the city of San Francisco when they were trying to pass their Cell Phone Right to Know Act. Now, in other countries, you can see the same kind of regulatory capture. You'll see Verizon executives then in charge of the technology rollout and so forth. So, or in some communities, they just adopt ICNIRP limits, the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, which is a private, self-created, invite-only club with several of whom over the years have had long-standing industry ties. And there's a lot of publications on that. Glad to share if anyone wants to contact me more about ICNIRP and that. So what happens is countries will say, well, what limits should we have? How do we have safety? And they'll say, well, ICNIRP says this, the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, and that's who they're protecting. The radiation, really, the name itself says it all. And it's a 13-member, it's been termed actually a cabal by some in some investigative reports. Now, I talked about the International Commission on the Biological Effects of EMFs, but something I wanted to raise was there being a commission on technology and ethics, because I think that we need to bring together experts in ethics and human rights and the public to be working on this issue of how technology is rolled out, the way it's being rolled out, not just the wireless safety standards, but the whole situation, schools and so forth, schools, children, devices. I mean, why can't I get a cell phone with an off button? That's just a hard button. I can turn the darn thing off. Instead, you have to do all this business in order to turn the thing off. They don't want us to turn it off. That's unacceptable. It's just so anyway, I could talk more about that, but it's something that I've been thinking about. And actually, I was at a dinner party and this woman just casually said, there really should be an ethics commission, and it just stuck with me because we need to have that voice being heard instead of the companies which are basically ruling the show.
I'm actually thinking about synthesizing several different comments into one idea, speaking of metaphor and story. So I think of, do you know the game Jenga? I don't know if this exists around the world, but the stacking blocks, right? So the way I see the solution to all of this, because we're all here with different expertise and concerns, is to figure out which piece of the Jenga tower you're pulling out, because we need to pull out all of them. We need to dismantle, rattle the stability of an industry that is far-reaching, very powerful, very influential. And so, whether that is starting in your own home as a parent with things like what Luna's saying about how we parent our children, there's Kate's Jenga tower, perfect. Or whether it's what we do in the classroom as a teacher or what we do as an advocate or at the policy level, all of it matters. And I think that's one of the metaphor that I use when I am speaking and writing and thinking about this is this idea of being a first fish. And to me, in a school of fish, this is scientific, right? Fish swimming in the ocean. How do you get that school to change direction? It actually requires not one fish to pull away, but a second and a third as well. And then the movement shifts and then the school changes. And so to me, we are many first fish here, but we also need those second and third fish to come with us. And then when we have that shift in focus, we see that shift in movement. And as I said at the very opening, things are different now. So I would love to end my thoughts on it with that hopeful note that there are positive things happening, and you just have to find which piece of that Jenga tower we are. So thank you.
If everyone starts coming out about this and working together in your community publicly, it makes a huge difference. That's how you get other people to join. We have a safe tech PTA group that was formed years ago. It's now gotten quite powerful. So start talking about it, get people together, have meetings, and getting news stories is really a way to put this issue out there because, children need to see a new food that they like a broccoli or whatever. It takes several times. It can take over 10 times to see it before you go, oh, I need to think about that. And other people haven't even thought about this. They need to start seeing it, hearing it, and then they will jump in and decide to taste it. I'm sorry, Cindy. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you very much for a very informative webinar. I would like to see this be available to get to other people. This was one of the amazing ones I did. There's a couple of things that all these speakers are great, but one thing that we have to do in the macro picture of this is get to the parents. A lot of these young parents that are going have children in schools, they are so hooked on technology that it's hard to reach these parents. So there has to be some sort of movement to educate these parents in schools, maybe via movies, maybe Angel Studios, people like that are getting informative videos out there or movies out there to educate people on these 5G technologies. I mean, Verizon, RF, David Witowski from Verizon, who is their hired gun for RF radiation, stood in front of our Board of County Commissioners meeting and said no one should ever hold a cell phone to their ear and no one should ever carry a cell phone on their body. And he, because of the global blastomas and the tumors that RFK Jr. From Human Health Services is saying that is creating tumors in the ears, etc. But parents are so uneducated. We held a symposium that provided a 2-hour symposium. And after that, we had crowded board meetings to put the pressure on our members to make good decisions. The other thing is ordinances. All these cities, all these communities need to strengthen their ordinances and their master plans, for to ensure that when the Board of County Commissioners and the planning commissions are making these decisions to put cell towers up next to nurseries and daycares and children's schools, etc. Because in the United States, the only time we can talk about healthcare is when you're going to a school board meeting, which we did effectively and stop them from putting cell towers on a football field for children.
I wanted to say one more thing. When I was raising children, I think most of us on this call or whatever, have experienced when you're taking a toy away from a toddler, the best thing to do is hand them another toy, a replacement toy. So we're taking it away from technology, away from kids. We're taking it away from parents. We're taking it away from the industry. We're taking it away from the military. We're taking it away from everyone. So there has to be a different toy to replace what everyone's using. And the question is what that might be. With kids, I think it's getting their families back and playing outside and, organizing fun time and street parties and playing outside. So that's a little bit easier. But in general, how do we give people back the toys, a replacement toy for what they're losing?
Thank you, Kate. That was just so eloquent. I think that's a very, very good thought to end on, actually, and something we all need to think about. I assume you finished what you were saying,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to thank, before we all disappear off, I just wanted to thank all our amazing speakers again, and to our audience for participating by staying on this long and being part of this really lively discussion, which I think is very exciting. And I think some of the ideas that have come out are amazing and we could take forward. And last but definitely not least, I'd like to add a big thank you to our wonderful team who've worked so hard, including those who worked behind the scenes that didn't get seen today. And without whose support, we really could not have brought this vision into reality. And I'm just so thrilled that we could have. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Amanda, also. Thank all of you. Blessings.
Yes, thank you to everybody.